Chapter 1188 just changed the way we should think about Gear 5. But I don't think most people realize why, okay? For days, I've seen people saying the exact same thing. Luffy needs Gear 6. Gear 5 isn't strong enough. They're even saying Imu is too overpowered. I don't think this is what we were looking for. But guys, I don't think that's what Oda was telling us at all. Because when Imu looked at Luffy, Imu never insulted the Devil Fruit. Imu insulted Luffy. Think about that. Imu has seen the original Joy Boy. Imu fought the original Nika. Imu knows exactly what the peak of this power looks like. And after watching Luffy fight, Imu's conclusion wasn't the fruit was weak. It was you're weak. That changes everything. Because if Imu's right, then Gear 5 isn't the problem. Luffy is. And today I want to show you why One Piece chapter 1188 may have just revealed the biggest secret about Nika we've ever seen. Not that Gear 5 needs another transformation, but that Luffy still has no idea what his own power is actually capable of. Ever since Gear 5 debuted against Kaido, we've treated it like the finish line, right? The final gear, the strongest form, the peak of Monkey D. Luffy. And honestly, Oda wanted us to think about that. Against Kaido, Gear 5 felt unstoppable. Luffy turned lightning into a weapon. He grabbed Kaido like a jump rope, right? We saw him jumping Kaido and we were like, what? He became a giant. He laughed through attacks that should have killed him. It wasn't just another transformation. It felt like reality itself had become Luffy's playground. Then Egghead reinforced that belief. Rob Lucci, an awakened Zoan, one of Cypher Poe's greatest assassins, completely overwhelmed. Then came Kizaru. Yes, Admiral Kizaru. Admiral Kizaru exposed Gear 5's stamina problem, but Luffy landed White Star Gun hard enough to incapacitate an Admiral. Then came Saint Saturn. Then the 5 Elder. Gear 5 could toss them around like toys, flatten them, stretch them, grab them, spin them, turn the battlefield into a cartoon. Every fight seemed to confirm the same conclusion. Gear 5 had reached the top until Imu. Because for the first time, Gear 5 didn't look complete. It looked unfinished. Not because the transformation changed, but because of the person standing in front of it. And that brings us to the biggest misunderstanding in the entire fandom. This is the detail I think almost everyone missed. When fans talk about chapter 1188, most discussions sound like Imu is stronger than Gear 5. Nika isn't enough. Gear 5 failed. That's not what happened. Listen carefully to what Imu is actually doing. Imu never says the Nika Fruit isn't impressive. Imu never says this awakening is incomplete. Instead, Imu compares Luffy to Joy Boy. That is completely different. That is a completely different conversation. Imagine two master swordsmen holding the exact legendary blade. If one loses, does that mean the sword is weak? Of course not. It means one person hasn't mastered it fully yet. That is exactly what Imu is saying. Imu isn't judging the weapon. Imu is judging the swordsman. And here's why that is terrifying. Imu is the only living character we've ever met who's actually fought the original Joy Boy. Everyone else sees Gear 5 and thinks the Sun God has returned. Imu sees Gear 5 and immediately notices everything Luffy still can't do. That means Imu knows something we don't. Imu knows what perfected Nika actually looks like. And if that is true, then One Piece chapter 1188 wasn't exposing Gear 5's weakness. It was exposing Luffy's inexperience, and we all have been waiting. Now, here's where the theory gets really interesting. Because if Imu is comparing users, then we have to ask one simple question. How much does Luffy actually understand about the Nika Devil? And honestly, the answer might shock you, because after everything that has happened, Luffy still doesn't know what food he ate. Think about it. Every attack is still Gomu Gomu this. Every technique is still Gomu Gomu no that. Luffy isn't trying to become Nika. He is trying to imitate Joy Boy. He's still fighting exactly the way he always has. He's just using powers that has become infinitely more ridiculous after awakening. Now compare that to what we've seen, or we've actually seen Gear 5 do. One moment, Luffy creates goggles out of thin air. Another moment, he grabs lightning. Then he turns into a giant. Then he Haki inflates his muscles. He then reshapes the battlefield. Then in One Piece chapter 1188, he suddenly takes on that bizarre genie-like appearance. None of these abilities were learned. None of them were trained. Most of them, they just happen. Almost as if Luffy is discovering the fruit while he's fighting. And that is a huge difference because mastery isn't the same thing as experimentation. Imagine handling someone the keys to the world's most advanced fighter jet. They might figure out how to take off. They might even win a dogfight. But that does not mean they've discovered every system hidden inside the cockpit. That is Luffy. He's flying the plane. He just doesn't know everything it can do. And that may be exactly what Imu realized the moment they clashed. Now here's something I don't think enough people appreciate. Every major villain since Wano has exposed a completely different limitation. Not in Gear 5, in Luffy. Take a look at the progression. Against Kaido, Luffy learns Awakening. Against Lucci, he learns Confidence. Against Kizaru, he learns Stamina wasn't infinite. Against the 5 Elders, he learns overwhelming your opponent isn't the same as defeating them. And now against the King of the World, Imu, he's learning something even more important. And that is mastery. Think about how Oda has always written Luffy's growth. When Luffy learns Gear 6, was it perfect? No. It damaged his body. When he first used Gear 3, he shrank afterward. When he learned Future Sight, think about it. Katakuri completely outclassed him. When he learns Advanced Conqueror's Haki, what happened? Kaido still knocked him unconscious. Every single major power-up follows the exact same formula. Unlock it first, master it later. So why would Gear 5 suddenly be different? Why would the biggest power-up in the entire series be the only one that Luffy masters instantly? It wouldn't, because that's not how Oda writes. And in chapter 1188, this actually proves it. Now, this might be the biggest revelation of all. For years, fans have asked, what made Joy Boy so powerful, right? Most people's answer is he had Nika's devil. A lot of people say that, but us purists know this. But this chapter 1188 suggests something completely different. Joy Boy wasn't stronger because of the fruits, he was stronger because he mastered it. There's one piece of evidence that's impossible to ignore. Egghead. Joy Boy has been dead, right? For over 800 years. And yet the Haki he left behind was still powerful enough to shake the battlefield. It overwhelmed the 5 Elders, right? It reached across impossible distances. It even made Imu react in Marijoa. 800 years after his death. Let that digest for a second. If Joy Boy's leftover Haki is still terrifying centuries later, imagine what it felt like when he was actually alive. Now compare that to Luffy. Luffy has awakened the same devil fruit. He has the same heartbeat, the same drums of liberation, the same white hair, but does anyone honestly believe Luffy's Haki is anywhere near that level? Not yet. And I think that is exactly what Imu noticed. Imu looked past the white hair, he looked past the laughter, he looked past the awakening and saw something that was missing. Not freedom, not imagination, because Luffy has all of that. Not power, will. Because in One Piece, the greatest power has never been the devil fruit. It has always been the person using it. This is the advantage nobody else in the story has. Kaido never fought Joy Boy. Lucci never saw Joy Boy. Kizaru never stood against Joy Boy. The 5 Elders feared Joy Boy. But as far as we know, none of them actually fought him the way Imu did. Only Imu knows what the complete version of Nika looks like. That is an incredible advantage, because imagine being a basketball coach who watched Michael Jordan in his prime. Then someone tells you another player is the next Jordan. You don't need anyone else to tell you if that's true, right? You've already seen the original. That is Imu. The moment Luffy transformed, Imu wasn't impressed by the white hair. Imu wasn't surprised by the drums of liberation. Imu wasn't fooled by the laughter. Imu at that moment was comparing every movement, every attack, every decision against the original Joy Boy. And apparently Luffy didn't measure up. That doesn't mean Joy Boy was destined to be stronger. It means Joy Boy had reached a level Luffy hadn't reached yet. There's a huge difference. One is fate, the other is experience. And One Piece has always chosen experience. Roger wasn't born the Pirate King. Whitebeard wasn't born the world's strongest man. Shanks wasn't born with overwhelming Haki. They became those people through decades of fighting. Luffy has had Gear 5 for what? A few weeks? A few months maybe? Joy Boy could have spent years, possibly decades, learning every single single possibility hidden inside Nika. So when Imu says Joy Boy wasn't this weak, maybe Imu isn't saying Luffy can never reach that level. Maybe Imu is saying you're still a novice, you're still a beginner. Now let's address the question everyone is asking. Does Luffy need Gear 6? Honestly, I don't think so. And I think Oda has been telling us this for years. Look at every major upgrade Luffy has ever received. Gear 2nd didn't become stronger because Luffy invented Gear 3rd. It became stronger because he mastered it. How about Gear 4? Gear 4, let's take Bound Man, right? Or Snake Man, or even Tank Man, right? Those weren't completely new power systems. They were different applications, right? Of the same power. Even Haki works the same way. Observation Haki becomes future sight. Armament Haki becomes internal destruction. Conquest Haki becomes advanced conquest Haki. Notice the pattern? Oda didn't replace powers, he evolved your understanding of it. So why would the Nika Fruit suddenly break that rule? Why would the fruit, literally called the most ridiculous power in the world, need another transformation? Wouldn't it make far more sense if the fruit itself already had limitless potential? If the only limitation was the imagination and understanding of the person using it, that's a much more One Piece answer, am I right? Not a bigger form, a better user. This is where I think Oda is quietly taking the story, because we've been calling Gear 5 a transformation. What if that's only part of the truth? Think about it. Think about everything we've already seen. Luffy becomes gigantic, then normal, then muscular, then inflated, then stretches in far impossible ways, then creates goggles out of thin air, then grabs lightning, then in this chapter literally turns into a genie. Those aren't upgrades. Those are separate gear. They are expression, different ways. The same freedom manifests itself. What if Gear 5 isn't one form? What if it's an entire system of ability that Luffy hasn't fully explored? Imagine Joy Boy, someone who may have lived with this power for decades. How many techniques could he have discovered? How many applications of Gear 5? How many things could he do? How many things could he do that Luffy hasn't even imagined of doing yet? Suddenly, Imu's disappointment finally makes sense, because Imu isn't looking at a finished potential. Imu is looking at someone who has barely scratched the surface. Now, this might be Oda's greatest piece of storytelling, because every single time someone mistakes Luffy for Joy Boy, Luffy gives the same answer. I'm Luffy, not I'm Joy Boy. He never says that. Not I inherited Joy Boy, or I inherited Joy Boy's will. Boy, not I have become Joy Boy, because we're talking about Joy Boy. He just says, I'm Luffy. That isn't accidental. Oda has repeated it too many times. It's become a slogan. It's become a catchy phrase, which means this story was never about resurrecting Joy Boy. It's about proving that inherited will isn't the same thing as inherited identity. Roger wasn't Joy Boy. Luffy isn't Roger. Luffy isn't Joy Boy. He's carrying their will, not becoming them. Luffy shouldn't defeat Imu by becoming a better Joy Boy. He should defeat Imu by becoming something Joy Boy never had the chance to become, which is Monkey D. Luffy, at the peak, at the absolute peak of his own freedom. And if that happens, history doesn't repeat itself. History changes. But here's the irony. Imu wants to prove that Luffy is enjoyable. But every time Imu says that, every comparison, right? Every insult, every criticism, Imu is revealing another piece of the puzzle. It's almost like a master criticizing a student. You don't understand your footing. Your timing is wrong. Your technique is incomplete. The criticism hurt, but it also tells the student exactly what he needs or she needs to improve. Imu may become Luffy's greatest teacher without ever intending to, because in One Piece chapter 1188, the chapter didn't just show us Luffy losing, it showed us the gap. And once Luffy understands what that gap actually is, that's when the real evolution of Gear 5 begins. Not Gear 6, not another Devil Fruit, not another Chosen One reveal, just the first person in 800 years to truly master the freedom of Nika in a way that even Joy Boy never could. When Gear 5 first appeared, it felt like the end of Luffy's journey. The strongest transformation, the legendary Sun God, the power that defeated Kaido. For nearly 2 years, we've been asking one question: how can anyone beat Gear 5? Well, One Piece chapter 1188 quietly answered a different question. How much of Gear 5 has Luffy actually mastered? Those aren't the same same things. Because if Imu is telling the truth, then Luffy isn't fighting at Joy Boy's level. Not yet. And honestly, that should excite us, right? I'm looking forward to it. Because it means Luffy's greatest growth isn't behind him. It's still ahead of him, and I think that's why the Elbaph time gap comes in place. Think about Luffy's entire journey. Crocodile taught him courage wasn't enough. Rob Lucci forced him to invent new gear. Katakuri forced him to awaken future sides. Kaido forced him to awaken Nika. Every major defeat has expanded Luffy's understanding of himself. Not just his strength, his understanding. And that is exactly what Imu is doing now. He doesn't realize it though. This isn't another Kaido fight. This isn't another crocodile fight. This is the first battle where Luffy is facing someone who already knows what his future should look like. Imagine trying to surpass someone while fighting the only person alive who witnessed their greatest achievements. That is Luffy's situation. Imu isn't just the final villain. Imu is the only living witness to know the complete version of Sun God Nika. And that changes everything. Maybe we all been asking the wrong question. Maybe the question never was, does Luffy need Gear 6? Maybe the real question is, what does a fully mastered Gear 5 actually look like? Because Oda has never been a writer who replaces powers every arc. He evolves them. Observation Haki became Future Sight. Armament Haki became Internal Destruction. Conqueror's Haki became Advanced Conqueror's Haki. Gear 4 evolved into multiple styles. Why would the most ridiculous power in the world suddenly stop evolving? I don't think it will. I don't think it will. I really don't. I think Gear 5 isn't a finished transformation. It is the beginning of Luffy's final education. The fruit has awakened, but the man using it hasn't reached his ceiling yet. And that is why I believe One Piece chapter 1188 wasn't written to tell us that Luffy can never defeat Imu. It wasn't written to show us exactly why he can. Not yet, right? Because Joy Boy wasn't stronger simply because he had the Nika Fruit. He was stronger because he understood it. Luffy doesn't need to become Joy Boy. He needs to become something Joy Boy never had the chance to become. And that is the greatest version of Monkey D. Luffy. And that is the beautiful irony of this. Imu keeps trying to prove that Luffy isn't Joy Boy. But every comparison, every insult, every lesson that Imu has taught him pushes Luffy one step closer to not being compared to Joy Boy, but rather surpassing him. And if that happens, history won't repeat itself. For the first time in 800 years, history will finally change. So here's my prediction. The next evolution of Gear 5 wouldn't be another hairstyle. It wouldn't be simply Gear 6. It would not even be a random transformation pulled out of nowhere. It will be the moment Luffy completely understands what freedom actually means and combines that limitless imagination of Nika with Haki so powerful that Imu recognizes that this is no longer the boy pretending to be Joy Boy. This is the man who has surpassed him. So before I go, right, what do you guys think? I know I didn't ask you guys to like, comment, subscribe, but please do. Do you believe Gear 5 is already complete? And is Luffy strong enough, and does he need stronger Haki? Or do you think Oda is building towards an entirely new evolution of the Sun God Nika power? And also, one more question before I go. One more question. What did Imu see in the original Joy Boy that Luffy still hasn't shown us? Let me know what your thoughts are and your theories are in the comments below. I appreciate you guys. And if you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep One Piece theories every week, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you guys. Peace.